Good afternoon, esteemed panel members. My name is Jenning Chung, and I am joined today by my colleagues Garth Edwards, Manogia Tekrawal, Rimu Wamugo, and Mengyu Yuan, and we are from the Equity Policy Unit within the Department of Finance. Today, we will be providing a unique perspective and recommendations regarding a Canadian central bank digital currency, or CBDC. We will be focusing on the importance of understanding the needs of the unbanked and underbanked populations for a better CBDC policy design leading towards greater financial inclusion. We will present two options along with our recommendation and implementation plan on a proposed CBDC pilot project. Next slide, please.
Thank you. As we progress to the 21st century, we need to acknowledge the fact that the way we interact with money is starting to transform. Currently in Canada, total payment volume has continued to drop. Specifically, cash transactions have dropped 62% since 2016. And in 2021, it only made up 10% of total payment volume. However, cash remains the primary payment options for low-income individuals who we'll refer to as those like Lily, who rely on cash and check cashing services to avoid bank fees and to ensure they're able to provide for their basic needs. So if these trends continue, we can foresee Canada needing more digital currency options for consumers, especially vulnerable individuals such as Lily. The issue here is a decreasing ability of the under and unbanked individuals like Lily to participate in our modern economy. The shift towards more online services that do not account for Lily would further increase reliance on check cashing services and ultimately exclude them from our financial market. The Bank of Canada, in their contingency plan, has stated that they will consider launching a central bank digital currency if the use of banknotes were to continue to decline to a point where Canadians no longer had the option of using them for a wide range of transactions. Accordingly, now is the opportunity for the Government of Canada to investigate some policy designs regarding CBDCs. Next slide, please. So as we know, there are several forms of CBDCs that exist, but the version we are addressing today is a retail CBDC through intermediaries as a payment medium designed to act as a digital version of the Canadian dollar. A well-designed retail CBDC would carry the benefits of cash while also addressing its limitations, including its inability to complete online transaction and suitability for high-value payments. As mentioned, our team is here representing the perspective of vulnerable populations, specifically those who are unbanked and underbanked across Canada. But who exactly are we talking about? According to the Department of Finance, they are the 15% of individuals who have very limited relationships within the current banking sector, and the 3% who have no relationship at all within the banking sector. 46% of these individuals who are unbanked are those who are low-income earners who may be avoiding engagement with financial institutions due to the bank's right of offset and banking fees, which can result in more reliance on cash transactions. 12% are those individuals who are living in rural regions facing significant barriers accessing online banking services in its current form. Lastly, the 28% who are unemployed and unable to work, such as the individuals who experience homelessness, who face barriers due to financial instability, identification verification issues with the banks, as these individuals facing barriers also may face barriers accessing the channels to capture these statistics. We do want to point out as well that it is likely that these figures are much higher in reality. As well, considering Canada's path to truth and reconciliation with First Nations communities, it is important to note that this population is disproportionately represented among the statistics we have presented. Nearly 15% of individuals in First Nation communities do not have bank accounts. It is for this reason, it is critical to adopt principles such as the First Nations CAPPA-ACPAP principles, which stands for ownership, control, access, and possession, and a collaborative approach towards designing a retail CBDC suitable for unbanked and underbanked across Canada. Thank you. Next slide, please.
We'll now discuss global trends related to CBDC. Beyond Canada, countries across the world, both developed and developing, are considering launching or have already launched a pilot CBDC. 18 of the G20 countries are now in advanced stage of CBDC development. Of those, 7 are in pilot phase, including our closest trading partner, the US, where 5 states have launched a pilot. The European Central Bank is likely to start a pilot in 2024. In order to understand the possible design solutions that can address the needs of the unbanked and underbanked, we have looked to jurisdictions such as India, Nigeria, and Jamaica that have implemented a CBDC with a stated goal of financial inclusion. In these countries, their retail CBDC has been designed using the intermediated model, leveraging the existing financial institutions and community partners. Recognizing this global movement towards CBDC implementation, our research suggests that it is timely for Canada to consider the next steps towards developing a CBDC of its own. Next slide, please. When considering a CBDC, it's important to understand the complex intersections between stakeholders, both internal and external, that would be integral in the implementation of a CBDC. In addition to consumers, we have the Bank of Canada, the regulators, commercial banks, and retailers as key external stakeholders. Internally, we have our decision makers, which include many of you here today, who must weigh competing interests and provide policy direction. As such, it is important to consider and understand the positions and priorities of each stakeholder in relation to CBDCs. For example, the Bank of Canada, financial regulators, and the commercial banks are on the same page, developing a contingency plan through research to issue a digital currency in the future should the urgency arise and pending the federal government's direction. While retailers and the general public are trending towards contactless payment methods and will continue to seek these forms of transactions. Given these multiple perspectives and competing priorities, it is critical that a CBDC solution be designed in collaboration with all stakeholders, specifically keeping the needs of the unbanked and underbanked population in mind, that include universally inclusive concepts in order to build a more robust financial system for everyone in the future. Next slide, please.
When it comes to CBDC, we do recognize that doing nothing or maintaining the status quo is a potential option, especially when considering the priorities of other stakeholders and the complexity of this issue. However, by considering the vulnerable population, specifically the perspective of those who are unbanked and underbanked, CBDCs, if designed and implemented properly, will contribute to more financial inclusion in Canada over time. And if Canada can understand and meet the needs of the most vulnerable people, it can extend the benefits to everyone else. It is also important to note that for several years, Canada, along with other nations, has been contemplating next steps regarding CBDC. But as it now stands, many nations have already launched pilots of various designs. Given our findings and the trends, we propose that maintaining the status quo would not be a worthwhile option anymore, and that pursuing active implementation of a CBDC should now be considered a priority. Next slide, please. We have outlined 4 guiding principles and developed 2 proposed options as potential policy direction for the Bank of Canada. In terms of the principles, we propose pursuing a solution that provides accessible and inclusive payment options for vulnerable populations, in line with CAPPA-ACPAP values. A solution that protects the privacy, security, trust of vulnerable populations and their money. A solution that is collaborative and considers the needs and roles of all stakeholders, and a solution that allows transactions to be completed more efficiently. In terms of options, both are in support of piloting a retail CBDC as a new payment method. At a high level, the first option is to pilot a unilateral model. The second option is to pilot an intermediate model, both of which will be in the form of a digital token or cash card, still using the conventional digital currency model and payment technology method. These methods will be more accessible to the unbanked and underbanked population than existing cryptocurrency models. Next slide, please.
Thank you. I will now discuss the two options that we have presented. With respect to the first option, in a unilateral model, the central bank would carry out all functions in the payment system, from issuing the CBDC to distributing it. Some of the benefits of this model would include security of the currency, as it would be backed directly by the central bank, and consistency of its distribution. However, it may raise some privacy concerns and public perceptions about increased government control and access to personal data. From the government's perspective, it would also be administratively burdensome and relatively inefficient without the involvement of other established financial intermediaries. Overall, this option aligns partially with our guiding principles. Next slide, please. The second option would be to pilot an intermediated model, whereby the central bank would leverage the existing infrastructure within the financial sector to make the retail CBDC available to the public, including the unbanked and underbanked. In this model, CBDCs would be backed directly by the central bank while permitting intermediaries such as retail banks and fintech services to manage its distribution to consumers. This model has been utilized in most jurisdictions and presents an opportunity to redesign the existing financial infrastructure over time to better serve the unbanked and underbanked. The potential risks that have been identified with this model is that if not done correctly, it could potentially exclude unbanked and underbanked populations if current structures are maintained. In addition, for this model to be successful, offline capabilities would be required. These risks, however, can be addressed through careful design and utilizing best practices that have been proven to work. Next slide, please.
Given our analysis of the options, we recommend that Canada pilot the intermediated model. The proposed path aligns with the guiding principles and provides Canada with an opportunity to test its own market, make practical observations, gather information, and note lessons learned for the better long-term solutions. We understand that you have heard many perspectives here today, and we ultimately recommend that by taking a lens of the most vulnerable, Canada can build a more robust financial system with both an inclusive and accessible to everyone. Our recommended next steps would include establishing a project team to conduct additional research and to take this initiative through the approvals process. Next slide, please. Assuming the initiative is approved, implementation of the pilot would be led by the Bank of Canada and would involve three broad phases. The first phase involves consultation. This phase would consist of outreach to various groups utilizing a collaborative approach. For instance, Lily would hear about this initiative through a local community agency and have an opportunity to share ideas on what an effective CBDC would look like for her. This is beneficial in confirming essential design elements to meet the needs of the underbanked and unbanked. The second phase is development, which involves amending or developing legislative instruments required to support the pilot. For instance, Payments Canada recently submitted a pre-budget submission asking for legislative changes to the Canadian Payments Act to ultimately expand innovative and new payment methods. Another area to consider is infrastructure that includes multiple areas, including ensuring offline capabilities for payments. The next step would involve confirming pilot sites, reaching agreements with intermediaries, and developing a detailed communication plan. The third phase involves launching the pilot, which would include a media campaign to provide information and awareness regarding the pilot. In addition, gathering data to assess progress and evaluate the outcomes of the initiative. Next slide, please. Next slide, thanks.
Thank you. Given the complexity of CBDC implementation, we do know that there are going to be some financial implications that we should be taking into consideration, both from the government's perspective as well as those who are and underbanked. So in terms of the initial funding for this initiative, We are hoping that it's going to come from the recently announced 17.17 million in the 2022 federal budget, which was provided to the Department of Finance over 5 years to examine the financial sector stability and security as it relates to digital currency. Over time for the government, cost savings can be achieved from reduced production and handling of cash and the potential criminal activities such as theft. A CBDC can lead to cost savings in cash production and positively impact the environment as carbon emissions from production will be reduced. CBDCs could also allow for cost savings as program participants switch from mailing checks to sending payments directly. We've also noted through our research that many checks go unclaimed or missing, which present a lost opportunity for spending in the economy. The Canada Revenue Agency in May of 2022 has reported that over the years that they have approximately $1.4 billion worth of uncashed checks. By switching to a retail CBDC or supporting the pilot of that, we can see that individuals like Lily would be able to save hundreds and not have to use cash checking services and ensure that they receive the money that they deserve. Next slide, please. There are a few risks that we anticipate regarding our recommended approach on implementing a retail CBDC. For one, during the consultation phase, we may find insufficient uptake by the public or our other stakeholders. However, we do plan to address this risk through continuous collaboration and designing a solution that meets users' practical needs in line with the CAPPA-ACPAP principles. There are also risks around infrastructure, as the CBDC may be vulnerable to network or electrical issues. This, however, we would mitigate by offering offline solution and emphasizing backup cash management plans, especially at the early stages of the pilot. Next slide, please.
With respect to a communication strategy, the project team will work closely with the department's internal communication branch to develop a media relations strategy and key messages for our various audiences. As part of this strategy, we could launch a naming competition for the new digital currency, aiming at raising awarenesses and interests. A key component of the strategy will also be communicating with retailers and consumers to ensure that there is trust in the system and an understanding that CBDC are required to meet the evolving needs of economic activities. Specifically, the strategy will focus on communications to the general public, targeting the unbanked and underbanked and retailers, emphasizing the benefits of a retail CBDC to those groups. These benefits include lower transaction costs and faster payment processing time. For retailers, this could also mean opportunities to reach more customers. And for the general public, especially those who are unbanked and underbanked, this could mean freedom from complex rules such as right of offset, payment fees, and transaction fees. As such, through this strategy, if we are able to appeal to the most vulnerable, we can create a payment system that can benefit all. Next slide, please.
As we have seen, retail CBDCs provide a great opportunity for Canada to level the playing field in financial inclusion and ensure that a 21st century approach is taken to include the unbanked and underbanked. Looking back at Lily, if a CBDC is implemented, it would mean that she is able to complete transactions where cash is not accepted. Better access to financial resources ultimately help her in establishing a strong financial foundation. As we have illustrated, building a system that meets the needs of the most vulnerable leads to greater financial inclusion for all. Thank you for your time, and we are now happy to take any questions that you may have.
Thank you so much for your presentation. So I think we have enough time for all of our colleagues to ask a question. So I'm going to start with Randall.
Thank you very much. I enjoyed that presentation, but I would ask you to drill down a little bit, just a little bit more, and tell me or tell us how the movement towards a CBDC would actually get Lily to become better banked. I'm still struggling to how you're gonna move that dial by making another form of currency available to individuals who already have difficulty or already either or underbanked. And maybe the unbanked are the more important target population here than the underbanked. But I would just like to drill down a little bit more and to get one or two concrete ways that this will happen.
Great. Thank you for your question. Well, I think, one of the main things that we identified in this situation with Lily was that Lily currently, if she receives any form of checks or any, whether that would be from government programs that are providing assistance, or even if Lily is in employment and is receiving her paychecks, she often has to turn to places such as checking centers, which charge high fees, and as well, they take a percentage of the amount on that check. And we find that that is, unfortunately, the only way that Lily currently has access to her funds. And there's a variety of reasons as to why she may not want to have a traditional bank account, such as, we identified offset or even the time that it takes for a bank to process the check. And we really believe that with a CBDC, someone like Lily would be able to have better access to her funds. She would be able to get, funds immediately, and she wouldn't have to worry about going to, these places such as cash checking centers, which will charge high fees and put her not in the best situation. And we also thought about the idea of it being about better access to goods and services, because those that don't have a debit card or a credit card may be left out in situations where they only accept digital payments. So those are some of the areas that we've identified that we believe would help out Lily to support better financial inclusion.
Thank you. Let's go to Shirley.
Thanks. Great presentation. Thank you. I just had a question. Early in the presentation, you talked a little bit about global trends, and I'm wondering if you could talk just a little bit about some of the implications for the design and implementation of CBDCs with Canada's trade with established economies, but maybe also with some of the emerging economies.
Yes, certainly I can elaborate a little bit more with respects to that. In our research, we were focusing on the population, the unbanked and underbanked. And in our research, we did look at who some of the activities that they're involved in, and a lot of that pertains to remittance, sending money back home or receiving funds from family members. Some of those economies that are particularly have the highest level of remittance relationship with Canada are India, China, and Jamaica. All of these particular countries have actually piloted or implemented a CBDC. Part of the advantage of making a CBDC available to some of the individuals, like the unbanked and underbanked, is they could use e-wallet to send remittance home. The key thing about related to the e-wallets is that a lot of them are moving to online access only. Therefore, it's getting harder to send remittance at a cost-effective way with a brick or mortar. So this would be of assistance to the unbanked.
Thank you so much. We're going to go to Peter.
Thanks very much. I appreciate your focus on inclusion. I appreciate that that's your problem statement, and I appreciate the recommendation. It's really focused on your core or solving your core problem. In my world, I worry a lot about financial stability, which I didn't hear too much about. Just not the end of the world, but I'd like you to think about and maybe provide your wisdom on how this the introduction of a retail CBDC might upset industry structure and profitability, and if it does, should we care?
Yeah, thank you for that question. I think that's kind of why we decided to go with the intermediated model, where we are able to work with the existing financial institutions and have those intermediaries. We believe that they are a key stakeholder in a project of this nature, and we really want to work with them and include them. And I think in this case, we've identified that it really is the those that don't currently have a bank account that seek to benefit from this. We don't believe that it would be in competition with the existing financial institutions. We really believe that it will support the existing system by better allowing those that don't have banks to be included and to be on the same playing field as those with bank accounts. So we don't really see it as something that would compete within, with the existing financial institutions, but rather this would be a way to kind of have them included and to provide alternatives for, cash transactions and things that are already occurring outside of, the traditional, banking industry. And we believe too that this would also help with the financial institutions by further encouraging innovation and having that dialogue, because this seems to be of a rising interest in an emerging field.
Thank you. And we'll go to Ellen.
Thank you, and thanks for the presentation, gang. I'm hoping you can drill down a little bit further. This is related to a previous question, but not the same element. So you talked about how an intermediated model, if not properly designed, could exclude unbanked and underbanked. Could you talk more about how that would be the case and what you would do to mitigate that risk?
Thank you for the question. I can take that. So for some of the existing example for our particular population group, I will use the right of offset and transaction fee, account fees as example. It is unbearable for some of the low-income population, and the right of offset sometimes takes away the important income that would deposit into account that will be used by this population for their necessities. So if we implement a CBDC into the current system as is, it will hurt those population. But currently if you refer to our appendix slide on slide 21, there exists some current private sector that offers prepaid cards that do not require account or transaction fees, do not require a bank account, and they only require a mail drop address. Right, I'm not promoting any of these private sector options. I'm just suggesting that there are existing options that the government may take into concern that can help to build the system more inclusive.
Thank you. And Ron.
Thank you very much for the presentation. So a similar line of questioning to Ellen and Peter. So for if we're going to use banks as and other financial institutions as the kind of the distribution model for this payment option, that's going to require some level of investment by these institutions to be able to provide these services to people like Lily. How do you see the bank's incentives or the financial institutions' incentives to make this investment? I mean, clearly there's a market failure here. They would have invested to serve Lily if they thought it was worth their while. Why are they going to invest to work with the government to distribute this new payment option?
Thank you for that question. And in our review of when we're considering the CBDC starting out from an inclusive model, we did look at what some other jurisdictions have done. And for instance, Australia did a request for piloting CBDC models, and overwhelmingly they received 140 financial industry members interested in participating. Australia has also identified that financial inclusion is one of the goals of their CBDC model. This has also been mirrored as well in India, where they've had many intermediary banks and different financial institutions also coming forward to take part. What we're recognizing is that it's providing the incentive for the financial institutions is really having an opportunity to participate in a new payment method and learn from that, and also be able to increase their customer base by offering better services to all of their clients. So we do see it in alignment with the commercial financial sector. Just by observations from other jurisdictions, they've not had challenges with attracting the financial sector to participate.
Thank you very much.
Thank you so much. On behalf of the panel members, I would like to thank you all for your presentation today and your participation. And as a graduate of York University, I want to tell you that one day you'll be old and gray, so enjoy the time that you have right now before you. So all the very best.